Screen must be frozen. Sorry. It's been a bad day. I've been relaxing with a little bit of alcohol. I know. I know what you're thinking. I don't know what you're thinking, actually. Oh, it's just been one of those days. What are you doing? So, this is part 4. About Hamza. Wow. About Hamza. I think I'm going to get a new computer. Where'd that come from? I think I'm going to get a new computer to record, because this one really does annoy me. Your computer's not very good when you think it would run better when you threw it out of a second-story window, which typically doesn't make a computer run better. So, what was I sorry, my mind's all over the place right now. I don't remember. Anyways, before we get started for part 4, you can donate to the channel. If you do, and you ask for a video, then you will be put up as sponsoring for the video. You can subscribe. If you subscribe to the channel, tell me, like in the video, say, hey, I subscribed because, and then name something spectacular about me. Or don't, because whatever. And then give a thumbs up. That helps. It really does help. It's the algorithm, which doesn't make sense to any other YouTuber. And we just know that that's what they tell us, so that's what we do. We're like mindless robots, man. So let's get into part 4, shall we? We shall.
SubhanAllah, so Rasulullah was truly worried about the sister seeing Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu as much as he cried for him. By that time, Zubair came holding the 2 shrouds for Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and the people were shrouding their dead. Just as the Prophet ﷺ was about to shroud him, there was an Ansari man next to Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu who didn't have anything to cover his body. So the Prophet ﷺ took one shroud and he shrouded Hamza, and he could not shroud the entire body of Hamza, like Mus'ab, when we'll talk about him. And he shrouded Hamza with one, covered the bottom half, and he covered the bottom half of this Ansari man that was next to him, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And then the Prophet ﷺ, of course, started to lead the janazah, and there's all types of different narrations about the janaiz of Hamza and the shuhada of Uhud. How would have a janazah taken place? Did it take place? How many takbirat? How many janazahs did he pray? And one thing about Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it's narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, when he prayed upon Hamza, he did multiple takbirat beyond what is usually done in the janazah. This is something we see narrated authentically about Abu Salama, by the way. The Prophet ﷺ did 9 takbirat in the janazah of Abu Salama. What did he say between them? We don't know. But it was unusual. And they say when the Prophet ﷺ prayed upon Hamza radiallahu anhu, he did up to 70 takbirs. SubhanAllah, you imagine that? Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. As he was praying on Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, some of the narrations suggest that the Prophet ﷺ prayed 10 by 10 with the bodies of Uhud, and Hamza was in each one of the janazas. Like he left his body up there, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they kept bringing in the bodies, and the Prophet ﷺ prayed on the bodies of 10 by 10. And then the Prophet ﷺ proceeded to bury them. And we know that Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Abdullah were buried separately in a grave, and then the rest of them, Mus'ab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and then the shuhada were buried in accordance with their hifth of Quran. How much Quran they memorized, the Prophet ﷺ buried them in that order, in that fashion, by their hifth of the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the people of the Quran. Allahumma ameen. Now there are a few things to be mentioned here as well. The first is that when the Prophet ﷺ saw what was done to Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the mutilation And when the Sahaba saw the way that Quraysh was so shameless in the way they mutilated the bodies of the Muslims in Uhud, think about their mindset and where they were at the time. We let your captives go in Badr. Right? The Prophet ﷺ let them go in Badr. Not only did he not kill them or mutilate them, he freed them, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of them for just the ransom of being able to teach Muslims how to read. Like, we showed you so much ihsan, so much excellence in Badr, and this is how you repay us? You mutilate our deceased? So it was a sign of the ethical disparity, right, between the Muslims and their opponents in this regard. And so some of the Ansar at that moment started to swear that they will mutilate the bodies of the people of Mecca. That not only will we get revenge, but we will make an example of them as they made an example of our loved ones. And the Prophet ﷺ, looking at the body of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, قال لَأُمَثِّلَنَّ بِسَبْعِينَ مِنْهُمْ. Prophet ﷺ said in that moment of hurt and pain, as he was crying over the body of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that I will make an example of 70 of them. The way they made an example of 70 of us, I will make an example of 70 of them. Allah Azza wa Jal sends Jibreel alayhi salam to the Prophet ﷺ in those difficult moments. Surah An-Nahl, verse 126. وَإِنْ عَاقَبْتُمْ فَعَاقِبُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبْتُمْ بِهِ وَلَئِنْ صَبَرْتُمْ لَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَاصْبِرْ وَمَا صَبْرُكَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. SubhanAllah. Jibreel alayhi salam comes to the Prophet ﷺ with these verses. If you retaliate, then let your retaliation only be equivalent to what you have suffered. But if you patiently endure, if you show sabr, then that is certainly best for those who show sabr. وَاصْبِرْ وَمَا صَبْرُكَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Allah telling the Prophet ﷺ, be patient. And where are you going to derive that patience from? Allah. You'll derive it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Rasulullah, don't do to them what they did to yours. SubhanAllah, maintain the moral high ground. Maintain the ethical high ground over these people. And the Prophet ﷺ responded and he said, I will be patient, inshallah. SubhanAllah, and that's why in Fatah Makkah, the same people who mutilated their own in Uhud, they're at the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca. SubhanAllah, what could he have done to them? Right? And justifiably, remember what you mutilated us in our city in Medina? Well, we're back now, and you're at the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ. And so now it can be done to you in the same way you did it to our loved ones. Think about the emotions, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, no, I'm going to be patient. So that's the first thing, this incident at the death of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The other thing, subhanallah, about the death of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu and what it did to the city of Medina at the time. When they all went back to Medina after Uhud, everybody in Medina had a deceased person from Uhud, right? Everyone had a relative that was killed in Uhud in some way. So everyone in Medina was crying. And there was a particular thing called the niyaha, which was the wailing ceremonies, the mourning that the women would do in particular in Medina, mourning over the deceased. And the Prophet ﷺ was walking the streets of Medina, and he sees the crying and the wailing of the women in Medina, and the men as well, in their niyaha, in their grief over what has happened. And the Prophet ﷺ, he puts his head down, and he says, "Tabkuna qatlakum." You cry over your dead ones. He said, "Ammi Hamza, my uncle, la bawakiya lahu." There's no one to cry over him. Like, subhanAllah, his sadness, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All these families in Medina are gathered and they're all crying over their deceased ones. He said, but my uncle Hamza, who the Prophet ﷺ cried more for than anyone that they'd ever seen, right? The way he cried over Hamza was the deep cry. They said the weeping of the Prophet ﷺ when Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu was massacred, when he was murdered that way. So he said, Hamza has no one to cry over him. So what did they do in Medina? They went all around the Prophet ﷺ's house and they started to loudly wail out of their love for the Prophet ﷺ. SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah. Like, think about their love for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like subhanAllah, we ignored him while we were crying over our own. We forgot that he lost his uncle in this battle. And he doesn't have his family with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, it's different. And so they all went in front of the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they started to cry and mourn and weep. And this is when the hukum, the ruling of an-niyaha, the prohibition of mourning, wailing out loud, came down only after the death of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Wailing is to shout, to cry loudly at the death of a person. So Hamza radiallahu anhu was the last person that this would be allowed for. After that, the prohibition came down that there is no niyaha, there is no wailing at the time of death over a person. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Sayyidu shuhada'i inda Allahi yawm al-qiyamah, Hamza bin Abdulmuttalib. As we said, it is an authentic hadith about him, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And Rasulullah ﷺ would visit the shuhada of Uhud. And by the way, he would pray janazah on the shuhada of Uhud multiple times. There's a ruling in this that if I miss the janazah of a person and I wanted to attend the janazah and I go there later, can I pray janazah? Yes, you can. Days after? Yes. Weeks after? Yes. The Prophet ﷺ was still praying janazah on the shuhada of Uhud. Years later, he went out and he prayed janazah on them again, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how many janazahs did the Prophet ﷺ perform on Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the shuhada of Uhud? And the Prophet ﷺ would point to them and he would say, Ana shahidun ala ha'ula. I am a witness upon these people. I am their witness on the Day of Judgment. SubhanAllah, these amazing human beings. And when the Prophet ﷺ was about to die, he went out to visit Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the shuhada one last time, and he prayed upon them one last time, and then he went to the Baqi' next to him where the Sahaba were buried, and then the Prophet ﷺ went to his home where the sickness would become severe and he would pass away, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so this is Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the place that he has in Islam and the person that he was. Now subhanAllah, I know I'm going for a very long time, but I want to mention a few things here in conclusion. Number one of the amazing things about this is that Wahshi, the one who threw the spear to kill Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and Hind, the one who cut open the chest and chewed his liver, both became Muslim. Both became Muslim. And their Islam was described as being outstanding. So they didn't just become Muslim, they actually became pious people. Think about that. Alright? Hind, the Prophet ﷺ forgave her right away when he went back to Mecca and Fatah Mecca. She was afraid. How am I going to approach the Prophet ﷺ when I caused him that much pain? How am I going to seek his forgiveness? She sought the forgiveness from the Prophet ﷺ and Rasulullah ﷺ forgave her. And Hind went on and she became a pious Muslim woman. Wahshi, and in fact, subhanAllah, narration about Hind coming to the Prophet ﷺ and complaining that Abu Sufyan was cheap with her. And the Prophet ﷺ said to take from his wealth, but do not exceed what you need, right, when you take from his wealth. So the Prophet ﷺ even showing her lenience and the Prophet ﷺ speaking to her with ihsan, with excellence and helping her in her situation, she became a pious Muslim woman. Wahshi became a pious Muslim man. And there's a narration about Wahshi, which is very interesting because sometimes the way the stories were told, subhanAllah, in and of itself, is a lesson for us. It's an authentic narration, it's a long narration from Ja'far ibn Amr ibn Umayyah, who said, I went out with Abdullah ibn Adi and we reached a town of Al-Hims. Wahshi, radiallahu anhu, settled in Al-Hims in Syria. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free it. Became a great mujahid in Islam, a great warrior in Islam. And he said, we went out to Al-Hims and we were asking about the Sahaba, their tabi'een. So we asked, where is Wahshi? So they pointed to where Wahshi lives. And they said, we want to go ask him about the killing of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu. I mean, he is marked forever in Islam as that person, right? So they went to Wahshi and they went up to him and they said he was in the shade of his home as if it was a full water skin. Like he was, subhanAllah, staying in his shade. He was, really away from the people, but he was residing in his own element, in his own system, right? This was a man radiallahu anhu that had moved on from taking the life of someone very precious to the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. So they said, we went up to him and we were a short distance from him. And Ubaidullah was wearing a turban and Wahshi could not see except for his eyes. And then Ubaidullah, he said to me, do you know who I am, O Wahshi? And Wahshi, he looked at him and he said, no, but I know that Adi married a woman named Qital, the daughter of Abu al-As, and she delivered a boy from him in Mecca. And he started to go through it, but the point is that your feet resemble, he said, subhanAllah, he said, I know, it's actually fascinating, I know that Adi married a woman called Qital, the daughter of Abu al-As, and she delivered a boy for him in Mecca, and I was the one that looked for a nurse for that boy in Mecca, and your feet look like his feet.
How do you recognize feet? How do you what do you have, like a really long toe? Like extremely long, really weird? How do you recognize feet?
That's how sharp Wahshi was. I remember the feet of a baby that I carried in Mecca a long time ago, and your feet looked like that baby's feet. So Ubaidullah, he uncovered his face and he said, "That's me." So he said, "Can you tell me the story of how Hamza radiallahu anhu was killed?" And Wahshi starts to recount to them the moment that he killed Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and particularly how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had asked him to describe how Hamza died, and the Prophet ﷺ was so hurt that the Prophet ﷺ could not even look at the face of Wahshi. He forgave him, he accepted his Islam, but he couldn't even look at his face. So Wahshi says, I lived with that pain. I lived knowing that I caused that hurt to the Prophet ﷺ. SubhanAllah, imagine, like, how am I going to recover from this? I caused him so much pain. And the Prophet ﷺ couldn't look at my face because he remembered the murder of Hamza radiallahu anhu when he looked at me. He forgave me, but it was hard for the Prophet ﷺ to look at me. So he said, until the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, he said, I went out in Hurub al-Ridda. I took that same spear that I killed Hamza with, and I marked Musaylim al-Kadhab, the false prophet, the man who killed so many huffaz of the Quran, this wicked man. And he said, I went in the battle.
This is the guy who did that. I just watched the video on, is it Nusayba? Nusayba. And it talked about the false prophet at the end. And, okay, so I got it wrong as to who it was that threw the spear. Okay, so that, he threw the spear and killed Hamza. I was thinking he threw the spear and hit the guy. Is it the same person though? Now I'm confused. Is it the same person who was carrying the flag and got like his hand cut off and his other hand cut off? And then I don't know what else they did. They threw a spear through him. So many people. So many people. Maybe this will help me remember. Nope, still confused. All right, back to the video.
And I marked him, and I threw the spear at him, the same spear I threw Hamza radiallahu anhu. And it went right through Musaylama al-Kadhab. And I said, one for one, qataltu khayr al-nas, I killed the best of people. And then I killed the worst of people. SubhanAllah. Some of the Sahaba, some of the ulama, they said, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. We thought about that verse, say, oh my servants.
Just a side note. I said it in the video about Nusayba. I hope I'm saying her name right. Wow. I just completely drew a blank. Oh, the false prophet, the liar. That was who it was. I don't ever, and I'm sure I could have heard about it, but I don't ever remember anything about him. But hearing about, I'm going to burp. Hearing about how he asked the one guy, I'm sorry about it, it was Nusayba's son. I just drooled a little bit. I don't know what's wrong with me. Oh, it's the alcohol. Nusayba's son, insert name here, that's him. And then another guy who I don't remember hearing the name, but they were sent as like emissaries to the liar. The liar sent people to Muhammad. Muhammad asked them, do you believe in them? And they were like, yes, he is a prophet, just like you. And Muhammad's like, all right, yeah, I should kill you. I'm not going to. Please leave. So then he sends people there, and this guy, Nusaybah's son, I hope I'm saying her name right. I keep repeating that, but I want to pay her the respect that she deserves, and her children. But I really don't want to offend her because, you know, she was a warrior. She was more of a man than me. But the son, the liar asked the son, do you believe Muhammad is the messenger of God? He says, yes. He goes, do you believe that I'm the messenger of God? And he was just like, what was that now? And he kept repeating that. And then the liar just crucifies him and dismembers him and everything like that. And the other guy, you know, clearly anyone in that position is going to do what he did, which was, yeah, no, you are a messenger, my buddy, and you're just going to get out of there and live. And I don't know why I'm talking about her now, talking about this story. Oh, it was okay, because it was the liar. Wow, hold on. Take some brain juice. Nope, that didn't help at all. That did not help at all. It's just going to make me burp. That guy who threw the spear and killed the liar, to me, in a way, it's a good ending to his story, because I mean, look, a lot of the early Muslims, you know, they fought him, and then they ended up converting or reverting. This is a long-winded nothing. Every single one of you who've listened to this for the last 2 minutes or whatever this is, you've all just you've lost brain cells. You might as well just finish this off. We're all dumber right now. Let's finish this video off, because it's just a shame.
Have transgressed against themselves, don't despair from the mercy of Allah. When you saw Wahshi, you thought about that verse. How do you recover from murdering Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu? Look what Wahshi did. He took it as motivation to kill the man who was an enemy to the Muslims, that caused so much harm to the Muslims, the false prophet Musaylama al-Kadhdhab. And this hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ, I mentioned this hadith some time ago, that Allah laughs at two people who meet in Jannah. One of them killed the other. SubhanAllah, you imagine a person meets his murderer in Jannah? Imagine Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Jannah, Sayyid al-Shuhada, seeing Wahshi and Hind in Jannah. How did this happen? SubhanAllah, how did this happen? But that shows you the redemption of al-Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave in the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ to these people. The mercy Allah showed them through the Prophet ﷺ. So if you're thinking, will Allah ever forgive me? Did you commit that deed? SubhanAllah, who do you think has a harder sin? The one who killed 99 and then 100 people from Bani Israel, or the one who took one Hamza radiyallahu ta'ala anhu? And somehow he redeemed himself. And guess who led the janazah of both Hind and Wahshi? Omar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. SubhanAllah. Both of them passed away, and Omar radiyallahu anhu led their janazahs. So SubhanAllah, I mean, an incredible story of Hamza radiallahu anhu, but there's something about this, that Hamza died so that Islam could live. Cared about Islam. He cared about Islam living after him and going forward. Hamza radiallahu anhu was not in this for the arrogance of it, the pride of it. No, it was because Iman had settled firmly in his heart. Look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And look at the mercy of Allah, that there is redemption even for Hind bint Utbah and Wahshi ibn Harb. The last thing I'll say, by the way, is that there's a narration, even though there's some weakness in the narration, that Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu mentions that a person came in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ, and he had a son, and he asked the Prophet ﷺ what he should name his son, and the Prophet ﷺ said, you should name him Hamza. So all the Hamzas in here, Be proud. Alhamdulillah. Your parents did you right. And for those of you that are expecting, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you a Hamza that also resembles Hamza. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to love these Sahaba and to be joined with these Sahaba, these Shuhada, these Sabiqun, these Awwaloon. SubhanAllah, he is a companion, the leader of the martyrs, the master of the martyrs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala join us with our beloved Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and these beloved people. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khaira. We won't be able to take questions this week because of adhan, but inshallah ta'ala next week we will. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Well said. I was going to say all that at the end of my video, but he did it much better. Yep, that was Hamza. So, question. Hamza, had he lived, would have been one of the he would have been one of the early what was the word? I want to say caliphate, but I don't. Anyways, he would have also been one of the people that gave advice to. That word has completely slipped my mind. Too much alcohol, apparently. So, the people who gave advice to Muhammad, what advice were they giving him? Like, was he, like, were they people who were telling him, hey, don't go to this place because, you know, there's a tribe there that we're not getting along with, that will see you and might want to start a fight, or kind of like a council of war, like, hey, we should do this. Ultimately, he has the final say, but what kind of advice were they giving him? That was in like episode 2, so why it's popping into my head now, I don't know. It's alcohol, man. It doesn't make sense. So anyways, we're going to end it here. I hope you enjoyed. I did. I'm going to jump into another video. Am I going to jump into another? It's 7:15. Maybe I'm not. Who knows? Maybe I will. No, I probably won't. Yeah, I will. I'll drink more. Then I will. All right, well, I'm going to end this here. So until next time, have a good day, have a good night.